John 11:35. Jesus wept. It is the shortest verse in the entire Bible, just 2 words. Most people know it as a trivia answer. Shortest verse, Jesus wept. Move on. But if you actually stop and sit with what's happening in John 11, these 2 words become one of the most theologically loaded moments in all of the 4 Gospels. Because here's the thing that most people miss. Jesus already knew what was about to happen. He knew Lazarus was going to walk out of the tomb. So why did he weep? Today we're going to find out. And the answer says something profound about who Jesus is and what God thinks about human suffering. To understand verse 35, we need the whole story. Lazarus, a close friend of Jesus, is gravely ill. His sisters Mary and Martha send word to Jesus, and Jesus does something strange. He waits 2 days before going. He tells his disciples plainly, Lazarus is dead. And then in verse 15, I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there. He knew. He let it happen. By the time Jesus arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Martha meets him, and then Mary. Both of them say the same thing. Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. And then, in verse 33, when Jesus sees Mary weeping, and the people around her weeping, the text says that he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And then in verse 35, Jesus wept. In first century Jewish culture, mourning was not a private affair. When somebody died, the community gathered. Professional mourners were sometimes hired. Weeping was loud, public, and expected. It was how you honored the dead and supported the living. So when Jesus arrives at Bethany and finds Mary and a crowd of people weeping, he's walking into a scene of communal, culturally significant grief. Now look at the phrase that's translated as groaned in the spirit in verse 33. It's a strong phrase. It carries a sense of being deeply moved, even troubled or indignant. Some scholars suggest Jesus was troubled not just by the grief around him, but by the reality of death itself. The intrusion of mortality into a world that wasn't designed for it. And then the crowd's reaction in verse 36 is telling. Behold how he loved him. In that cultural context, public weeping was the highest expression of love and solidarity. The crowd recognized it immediately for what it was. So here is where this gets theologically interesting. Jesus is God incarnate, fully divine. He knew Lazarus would rise. He had already told his disciples as much. So his weeping was not the weeping of someone who had lost hope. It wasn't grief born from not knowing the outcome, which means it must have been something else entirely. Christian theology has a word for this: solidarity. It's not sympathy, which is feeling sorry for someone from a distance, but solidarity, which is choosing to enter someone else's pain and feel it with them. Jesus, who held the solution in his hands, still stopped. He wept. He didn't skip past the grief to get to the miracle. He sat in it first. And that tells us something enormous about the character of God. Not a God who watches suffering from a safe distance and offers solutions. A God who enters the tomb of human experience, who feels what we feel before he acts. This is one of the passages built into Illuminate Gospel Insights, the Bible study app I made for the 4 Gospels. Here is the Theological Reflection tab for John 11:35. If you want to sit with this further on your own, the link is in the description. I want you to think about a time when you were in real pain. Not inconvenienced, actually in the kind of grief or fear that sits in your chest and doesn't move. And think about the people around you in that moment. Some of them tried to fix it, offered solutions, reminded you it would all work out. And some of them just sat with you. They didn't say much, just stayed. Which one actually meant more? There's something in us that knows the difference between someone who wants our pain to end so they can feel better, and someone who is willing to be uncomfortable alongside us. Jesus wept is God's version of the second thing. It's the theological claim that when you are in the worst of it, the God of the universe is not standing at a distance managing your situation. He is in it with you. He's not unmoved. He weeps. And only after that does he act. If you've ever felt like faith requires you to skip the grief and get onto the gratitude, John 11:35 gives you permission to stop. Grief is not a lack of faith. It's something Jesus himself did. Jesus wept. 2 words. But inside those 2 words is a picture of a God who doesn't rush past your hardest moments to get to the good parts. He enters them. He feels them. And then he moves. If this kind of deep dive into gospel context is meaningful to you, subscribe. I put one of these out every week. And if you want to explore insights like this on every verse in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Illuminate Gospel Insights app is linked in the description. I'll see you in the next one.